my brother and thy uncle, called Antonio, I prithee mark me, that a brother should be so perfidious. He whom next thyself of all the world I loved, and to him put the manage of my state, as at that time through all the sinews it was the first, and Prospero, the prime duke, being so reputed in dignity, and for the liberal arts without a parallel. Those being all my study, the government I cast upon my brother, and to my state grew stranger, being transported and wrapped in secret studies. Hello, welcome to the channel. Brian Jennings. This channel exists to discuss my relationship with Quentin Tarantino. This is my first video all week. If you recall, we're going through this book, Spherical Models, and we're making all the models. And as we get deeper into the book, the models get more sophisticated, and it just takes more time. So those lines were nice. Prospero the Tempest. I did it playing guitar in 2023, the same year I started writing Quentin, same year my debacle with Quentin began. Right? So, I have a lot on my mind, to be sure. I see that the channel's growing. I promoted a video. We have over 2,000 subscribers. Welcome, which is great. I'm gonna keep promoting these videos, right? Because he's using my scene in the continuing adventures of Cliff Booth, which is the movie Critic. It's all a bullshit joke, right? Like it's not a different movie. It's the same movie. Oh yeah, well, gosh. Right, he said he was selling the script that was like, would have been the thing. Right? It's a fuck you to me, right? Because I pointed out in my essay, right, that Cliff Booth murdered his wife on a boat and got away with it because Brad Pitt beat up his wife on an airplane and got away with it. Right? And so I find no fault. There's no folly in writing. I love writing. I'm a writer. Right? But for Sony to campaign for a wife beater to win an Oscar for beating up his wife. Right? That story wouldn't exist without Brad Pitt committing spousal abuse. Therefore, right? I think it would have been a true act of humility if he just did the part and they didn't campaign. Because, right, they respect Angelina Jolie and they respect that that's the first film he made without Harvey Weinstein. Right? So, week's been tough. Quentin and I have a case study. Legendary remote viewing relationship. Boom, right there. Right at the forefront of each other's consciousness. As a result of his campaign to steal my life, to steal my scene for free, when I didn't give him what he wanted at a screening of Jackie Brown last year at De Niro Con. Right, here's the ticket. Right, I was in the front fucking row. Right? And it was stupid. It was stupid. It was my fault. For sure. I was alone. I was looking at him. That's why I shoved that letter up to his face. And when he stuck his nose up at me and he turned his back on me, I didn't care about anything else that he had said. All I saw was, right, him still humiliating me. Right? Because I'm a simple, honest guy. And so this is why he's not cool. Right? That if he was cool, right, he would have wrote me immediately and said that was it. Like that was it. Right? Like, yeah, I didn't write you, but like that was it. You blew it. Here's some money for your scene. Fuck off. And that would have been reasonable. Instead, he, and I believe, at least two women, right? Perhaps two women and a guy, right? Perhaps a legion of foul fiends environed me and howled in mine ears such hideous cries, right? That even with the very noise I trembling waked, and for a season after could not believe but that I was in hell. They all conspired, he conspired, right, to compel me to blow my brains out. There's no other way to interpret it. How do I know that? Like, how can I say that, right? First of all, right, the way that he talks to me, right, it's worth pointing out, is the same way that Charles Manson talks to Pussycat in his novel. Oh, so clever, right? So Brad Pitt is Cliff Booth and Quentin Tarantino is Charles Manson. Right, if that tells you anything. Right? So, right, he wanted me to question him about his book, Cinema Speculation, right? He planted these seeds with bullshit occult mind power, right? With psychic mind violation, right? And so when I didn't give him what he wanted, he and the Legion of Foul Fiends, right, all, right, conspired, cast their allegiances with the devil, right, with the dark arts, right, boom, Baphomet, right, to overwhelm my conscious mind, right, and or humiliate me to such an attenuated degree that I would feel compelled to blow my brains out. And so the months unfolded, right, this thing with the daughter, and I've talked about that, and I suppose I'll talk about it in detail right now too, right, that, oh, I have a daughter that loves you, right, that's, right, that we played that game for a while, right, up until New Year's Eve, 12/31, when I printed out Allison's picture, Allison Tarantino, AllieJean_4, right, that's her Instagram handle. I assume she's the first bitch who pops up as the days continue to pass, but I don't know. He might know her. He might know her. Right? There was a girl that like put herself in front of me 2 different occasions when I was in LA. Right? All 6 sadistic mind games, right? Like that's what he's interested in, right? So I printed out her picture. I started remote viewing her, right? And they started poisoning my mind with bullshit. Right? And within like 2 or 3 days, she was a nasty bitch, right? A nasty hooker, right? As if it came from one of his movies. Right? My daughter's a bitch who gets pissed on, right? And then a couple more days passed, right? Eventually, I have no daughter, right? There's no, oh, joke's on you, ha 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 ha. And that's when it became obvious, like, oh, you've been... right, you've done all of this so that I'll blow my brains out. Like he didn't do all this for me to like be able to say this like to the public at large. Right? He's not interested in lying the last 30 years of his life. Right? He's gonna cut his lifespan in half if he has to lie perpetually to everyone in his life. And that's what he's doing right now. Right? That he's telling all of them that I've lost my mind because he can. Right? Because he has no honesty. Right? And so I've been trying to come clean ever since, right? And so he has descended into, right, the deepest depths of hell, of evil, right? To traumatize me, right? To compel me to blow my brains out. Also, he can have my scene for free. I sent him a scene of a writer yelling at people for reading his writing. The movie Critic is a movie about a writer, right? That's why he canceled the film, right? I started reviewing movies in protest. Right? And he said, oh, no, this is a message from God. Like, no, this guy's super cool. Right? But he didn't want to talk to me like a man. Right? He wanted it to be some subtle bullshit mind game. And I know that he shows them something, but it's a lie. It's bullshit. Because if I had a document, right, we wouldn't be where we are. I've spent so much time, right, trying to appease him, like feeling bad, like feeling guilty, respecting him, right? And now I see that it was all humiliation. It was all, like, he doesn't respect me at all. So I'm done feeling sorry about it, right? Because these things that he has been doing is the pinnacle of evil, right? So we're going to talk about it, right? And since we're talking about it, right, let's talk about it, right? All of these things that you see here, right, are expressing a piece of the noble hologram that all of life emerges out of. Right? And so, if we say that life is unfolding according to a divine plan, right, then space and matter are equal opposites of each other. Right? And this touches on the philosophy of Walter Russell. This touches on the idea of Platonic forms. Right? And this is what Socrates is discussing in the allegory of the cave. Right? that the things that we see are shadows of the idealized form. The tree is not the tree, right? It's a corruption, right? It's a kinetic corruption. So all of life unfolds according to this dignity, right? Whose love was of that dignity, right? That eventually you arrive at atmospheric strata, right? Mineral, vegetable, animal, man, right? And so at the highest levels of man is this notion of art, right? Art with a capital A, artist, right? Fartist, right? That an artist is channeling, right? Just like, right? The divine creator of all creation channels his wisdom. And so how does that occur, right? If you say that life has no meaning, if you say that everything is a pure arbitrary happenstance of chaos, then that's valid intellectually. I would say it's shallow and devoid of soul or meaning. But you can argue that memory, the collective unconscious, is a static embossment upon the body of space as a result of motion. Right? But if you say mind came first, right, in that philosophy, in that pinnacle of nihilism, right, then mind, consciousness, is an accident of motion. That's how it has to be. There's no other way it can be. But if you revert it, right, and say mind moved space first, right, then everything becomes ordered, right? The fine-tuning argument, right? That mathematicians are finding it harder and harder to justify the philosophy of atheism as a result of the mathematical precision of the fine-tuning of creation, right? That the likelihood of life being accidental, right, is far less likely, right? Like if you say, oh, what are the chances of life being accidental? That's an astronomical number, right? It's a 1 with 1,000 zeros after it, right? So if you said that mind moves, right, then you have to say, where does life come from? Where does the material world, the measurable world, emerge from, right? And so, right, I posit, right, that space is imbued with a twofold corruption of divinity, right? And this is in tune with the Kabbalah and all the spiritual masters in their own way, right? But in particular, the Kabbalah begins at Ein Sof, right, which is a pure abstraction, right? That there's nothing there, right? And then it's degraded once to Kether, right, which is the pure radiating emanation of deity, right? And then on either side of its first two emanations, right, is the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity, right? Bina and Chakma, wisdom and understanding, right? So, in my philosophy, in my worldview, space is a coin, and embedded within it, in terms of information, lies the potential for all of manifested creation. And this is the philosophy of Pribram and Bohm, the holographic model, right? So this expresses itself, right, as a static, infinite, complex nesting of polyhedra. Here's an example, right? Here's another example, spherical dodecahedron. Right? Here's another example. Here's another example. All within all structure within all. Right? All things that can be, all things that have been, are, or will ever be, are all embedded, perfectly nested within each other in every cubic centimeter of space. Diffused within that, right, complex hologram of quantum probability and electric potential is the impetus for motion, the divine light of deity. Right? And so, both of these exist perpetually in a state of rest. God is stillness. Be still and know that I am God. Right? It says be still over 50 times in the Bible. Right? That God is not something within creation, right? It is the still fulcrum which supports creation. Right? And this is the dignity of the Kabbalah, like Ein Sof, right? That it's a pure abstraction. It's a fulcrum with which motion may move around and within. Right? Walter Russell, for I am within all things centering them, and without all things controlling them. But I am not those things which I center or control. And eventually, God the Father seeks to express its wisdom. And so it does this by exerting pressure, right? If we say that all of life is embedded within this, kind of falling apart, but, right? That all that ever could be is embedded within this complex of 40 tetrahedra, 20 pointing up, 20 pointing down, right? A fourth dimensional Merkaba, right? Star tetrahedron, stella octangula, right? Then we can close this in a sphere, right? And cast a circle around the sphere and call that a great circle, right? Which is called a great circle because it's a circle that bisects the volume of a sphere, right? It's not a flat circle on a page, right? If we say there's 360 degrees to any circle, right? Then all 360 degrees, right? And really any number you pick, right? Is a potential vector of pressure, right? So after the divine light of God decides to exert its knowing, it has to decide upon what it wants to see, right? And so, right, its decision, right, is derived, as far as like what we see manifested in the material world, is derived by the dihedral, the angle or angles, right, combination of angels, right, with which the divine light of deity, the impetus for motion, exerts pressure upon the quantum manifold of space, right? So if one circle gives you 360-degree potential vectors of pressure upon it, right? And you can have an infinite complex of great circles, right, in any arrangement, right? Then you begin to glimpse the dignity of God's omniscience, right? And so when it begins to exert pressure upon it, right, space starts collapsing, right? The pressure, right, the motion, right, exerted upon it, right, engenders space to collapse and create friction grating against itself, right? And so as this whole volume, right, is collapsing to this thing in the middle, which is the vector equilibrium, and then it starts to oscillate, starts to pulse, right? That eventually the electric resistance gets so high that it can no longer remain inert space, right? There is no dead space, it's inert space, and erupts into incandescence as matter, right? And so, again, right, the specific angle or angel or compound of angles, right, offers you, right, the potential for how all things are manifested, right? So inevitably, there's this line in the sand, right? That's the horizon of your ignorance. I've talked about it many times. That you always have to take a leap of faith towards something, right? You have to put your trust in something, right? And so, some people, right? I'm sure any number of nice, well-meaning people that live around here, right? They say, no, there's no God, all that church shit. Nah, I don't buy it. And so they put their trust in chaos, right? My point being that, yes, I don't actually know, right? No one actually knows. So, right? If you recall, we're going through this book, Spherical Models. There it is. And so it's a little, right? I still haven't quite figured out how to make them like flat, you know? But there it is, the truncated dodecahedron, right? 12 decagons, right? And 20 triangles. It's beautiful. So, at the highest levels of art is this idea we refer to as psychic or clairvoyant. Right? And so a clairvoyant operates through a myriad of principles, but fundamentally, right, a remote viewer, right, though it's unbeknownst to most who practice, right, but they're sending out, right, like a cell phone tower, they're sending out an electric membrane, right, which is a thought force, right, it's a membrane of intention, right, your psychology, right, your individual consciousness, right, is engendering an electrical novel neuronal condition, right, which you send out in all directions as a sphere, right? And so, right, this is how you find people, right? This is how you can heal the sick, and this is how you can traumatize and try to destroy, right? But it's all the same process, right? And so my point, right, is that Quentin, right, and I believe his wife too, mother and father, but I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, they were playing this game where they let me believe that they had a daughter, right, and then they were playing another game after I started remote viewing, right, that she was a nasty bitch who gets pissed on, right, that she's a hooker who fucks 20 men a day. Right, that's my daughter. That's Quentin Tarantino's daughter. Right? And then he admitted that he has no daughter. Right? And so my point is that everything that I just said is true. Right? That he's engendering this electric condition, him and anyone else who's involved. Right? And they're pushing it out as a thought force, as a sphere of electrical intention and a membrane of an electrical field. Right? And so my point is that little girl, right? Like that real, he doesn't have an adult daughter. He has like a 2-year-old daughter, like a 3-year-old daughter. She's a little girl, right? She's completely defenseless. And now, right, they've poisoned her. Her psyche's a wreck, for sure. That they've put it in her. That it's going to manifest in 10 years. Watch. You watch. 15 years. Right? Right? No free lunches. Right? Right? All he had to do was tell me he resented me, pay me $1 million for my scene. But he said, no, we're playing the game. No, that's like the dark arts. Like, oh no, I'm the psychic. Right? And so it's just evil now. Right? And so I resent him, right, for being the way that he is, for sure. I'm trying to move on with my life. You know, I mean, I know that on some level I never will, right? Like they've created such a condition in our minds, right? That it, first of all, will never be free of each other, right? And he's done so much fucked up evil shit to me, it behooves him to watch me forever, right? Because he knows, right? Anyone can make anyone's life miserable. And I sent all of them an email yesterday, right? Like we're getting to the vanguard, right? On the 28th, he's getting his Lifetime Achievement Award, right? And he's him and the fucking cabal of degenerates that call him master, right? They're gonna hover over me and do evil, dangerous things to me that whole night, right? All because everyone around him just believes his bullshit, right? And it's really scary, you know? It's really scary. That they're all just like, yeah, evil's cool. Like, yeah, like, consequences be damned. Right? And so this is, right, it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal of his wisdom, right? That it's a wisdom to be a clairvoyant, you know? It's a wisdom to remote view people. Right? And so, right? I told him in the email, I said, I can do it. I can make anyone's life miserable. Right? It's nothing. Right? But, right? He's a coward. Right? He's a fucking pussy. And he's created such a condition in our minds, right? Where no matter what I do, he's gonna get the business end of it. Right? Because I didn't spend 300 hours remote viewing him. That's not, like, I didn't do that. Right? He did that. Right? And when I think about him like just praying that someone would stab me on the street in LA, it's like it's really degenerate and depraved. Right? And how everyone around him is just like, well, better him than me. Right? Or they're so fucking cowardly, right? That they refuse to stand up to him because he's a famous guy. Right? So that agency, William Morris Endeavor, they support satanic occultism. That's right. And hey, no, me and Alex Jones, right, my tinfoil hat on, right? But what I'm saying is that the things that people refer to, right, as magic, right, and sorcery, are the same things that people refer to as psychic and clairvoyant now. Right? That in 1600 they used words like magic and sorcery. 1500, 1400. Now they say psychic and clairvoyant and telepathy and all this. They're the same things. They're not similar things. They're the same things. Right? So, right? I got a lot more that I could say. Right? Leo DiCaprio talks about how it's a reflection of our times. Right? Something about one battle after another. Here's a question for you, Leo. Right? Why don't you take a DNA test? Are you the father of Quentin's son, Leo? Right? I think he is. Right? He's going to be evil to me constantly. It doesn't matter what I say. Right? And he'll just deny. He'll just lie forever. Right? But this is, right? Like, why do I say that? Right? Why do I say that? Right? In my novel, right? At some point, I was talking about making Allison come with my mind, and I said, "No, I'm never going to do that." And she said, "No, I want you to. I want you to." Right? Why do they say that? Right? Everything that is in my novel, right, stems from some psychological truth within them. Right? So Allison wants me to make her come with my mind, right? Because Quentin, right, makes Daniela come with his mind when she's fucking other men. Get it? And so I posit, right, that they invited Leo over and she knocked on the door at 2 a.m. Right? And right at that special moment, which happened 45 seconds after they started, right? She closed her eyes, and her and Quentin made a baby in the way they make them. Right? Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. Right? So I live in palpable fear every day. Right? So that's why we're talking about it. Right? He's a dangerous, evil man. And all I'm trying to do is move on with my life. And in that way, I am. And so that's something exciting. That's something we're talking about. I got cast in 12th Night as Andrew, Sir Andrew, first actor, boom, right there at the top. And that's wonderful. I went there and auditioned, like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and they called me and said, "Yeah, we want you to play this role." And so that's exciting. That's exciting. All I've ever cared about is Shakespeare, right? I wrote Quentin these letters, right? I get it. I don't want to play by his rules. Like, he has these expectations, and it took me a long time. It took me a good 5 months, 6 months, until he told me he has no daughter, essentially. I was like trying, I was like sad, and now I see that they were just poisoning my mind with bullshit because he wants me to blow my brains out, right? If he doesn't want me to kill myself, right, there's no reason he can't say something about me. Right? If he doesn't want to resolve this in a meaningful way, there's no reason his agency or someone can't reach out to me, right? But until... right? It's done. Like, it's done. I know he wants me to die. Like, that's it. Got me good. Wanted me to fucking put a bullet in my head, right? But I'm never going to do that. So, We have to resolve it, right? If he's using my scene, and he is. It's the coolest fucking scene anyone ever sent him, right? And sure, like, I'm an arrogant ass, whatever, whatever. Right? Quentin's an arrogant ass. Always has been. Right? And it would have been totally different if I had anyone to look to, I'm sure. But, right? Suppose I'll stop. Don't really know what else to say. All of life is expressing a divinity. Right? Its space is structured in a twofold manifold. The first of which is an infinite complex nesting of polyhedra. Here's an example. Right? Here's another example. Right? All nested inside of each other. The second is the impetus for motion, which exerts a pressure upon the manifold, right? Which forces space to collapse in a particular vector, right? Which causes the physical material matter to spray out, right, perpendicular, right? Infinite potential vectors of pressure, infinite potential vectors of material manifestation, right? At the highest levels of the unfolding of this plan is man. And at the highest levels of man is artist, right? And at the highest levels of artist is psychic clairvoyant. Quentin Tarantino is a powerful psychic clairvoyant, right? Who violates and abuses the minds of everyone in his life as much or as little as he wants. He respects nothing. He's a godless heathen. And when I think about him getting married in a church, right, with a rabbi, right, where they like smash the glass, it's just funny. It's just funny. They were laughing their asses off in their minds the whole time, right? Right before they went home and jacked off onto a cross, right? I wrote Quentin a series of letters about playing the lead in the movie Critic, right? Which set into motion a sequence of events that led to where we are now. First of him canceling the film, right? Then him, right, trying to control my mind at a screening of Jackie Brown, right? Then him, right, violating my mind thereafter. The two of us have a case study in remote viewing. We will never be free of each other past the edges of eternity, right? Right? He seeks my life with dangerous evil, right? And maybe he'll calm down. And all he's got to do is move on with his life, right? Right? But, right? He wants me to die. That's what he wants. And, right? In that way, my life would be easier if he was dead. I don't conspire towards evil. That's not how I operate. Right? That's why I sacrificed everything, right? That's why I went on the street, right? That's why I wrote a bunch of love poems to a woman who doesn't exist, right? Because I have love in my heart, right? Because I have God's love in my heart, right? And so you could take the same power, right? Boom, right? The power of the will, right? Aleister Crowley. And you can either heal the sick, right? Or you can debase your immortal soul and try to destroy someone, anyone. Right? Pray for me. Pray for Quentin. Pray to bring this to an amicable resolution. Otherwise, we're mortal enemies. Right? I don't want to have to worry about this forever. And I know that he doesn't either. Right? But as long as we persist in this way, right? So, see what's good in your life. Know that life is not an accident. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, share. All the best.